It's finally over. You won't have to carry that empty weight anymore. Not as a maybe, not as a let's hope it gets better. It is a finished work. The chapter of your life where you spent every waking hour trying to fill a gap that never quite stayed shut. That chapter ends right now. I know that on the outside, everything still looks the same. I know the scenery hasn't shifted yet, but the things that matter always change in the dark before they ever hit the light. What is shifting inside you right now is the foundation for everything that's about to appear. Stay with me until the end of this video. Because before we're done, you're going to receive the protocol that seals this breakthrough for good, so that the void you've dragged behind you for so long never again has a seat at the table of who you are. I need you to let me do something right now. I need to put a name on what you've been going through. Not the bullet points, the actual scenes. There are nights where you lie there, staring at the ceiling, and the audit begins. You didn't ask for it. Your mind just starts running the numbers on its own. Everything that hasn't arrived. The recognition that never came. The things you were certain would have happened by this point in your life. And you just lie there in the dark, tallying up what's missing in a silence that no one else can hear. There are moments when someone asks how you're doing, and you give the standard answer. You type out, "I'm doing great," with the same hand that was just trembling. You respond with total normalcy, maybe even a little humor, while on the inside it feels like a sinkhole with no bottom in sight. And the heaviest part isn't the lie itself. It's that you've gotten so good at the act that you don't even notice the mask anymore. You've watched the people around you move forward. You see them getting the very things you're praying for, and that quiet, suffocating question starts creeping in. What are they doing that I'm not? You try not to compare, but you've got the yardstick out before you even realize it. And it's always someone else's yardstick. It's a scale that's rigged to make you feel smaller every single time. In public, you smile. You show up. You hit your marks. You seek. You dedicate yourself. You do everything right, and yet abundance never comes. And the worst part, you start wondering if you're doing something wrong. If you're being heard up above, if it's meant for you at all. It's not a lack of faith or worthiness. It's a spiritual blockage that ordinary prayer alone cannot break. The Miracle Journal unblocks this in 21 days with a spiritual protocol that works exactly where your prayer doesn't reach. Along with the journal, you'll also receive as a gift the prayer guide and the Psalms manual, with the most powerful sacred practices and texts to deepen your transformation. To claim your version of the journal, tap the link in the comments right below this video. You present yourself as whole to the world, while the constant hum in the background is not enough. It's not even a lack of one specific thing. It's a hunger for something you can't quite name. You just know you haven't found it yet, and yet you're still standing. After everything, you're still here. That isn't weakness disguised as persistence. That is real, raw strength that just hasn't been called by its right name yet. If this message is reaching you today, hit that like button as your public amen. Heaven records what you confess in the open. So before we go any further, I need you to hear what I have to say about that void. I put you here because this word is for you. Not for someone like you. For you. And what you've been calling empty all this time? I was there. In every midnight audit. In every smile that cost more than anyone knew. I was there, holding that space open. Not because I abandoned you, but because I knew that only I could fill it the right way. Here is what you're going to receive before this video ends. First, the void you carried wasn't a sign of divine silence. It was a sacred space being guarded for an identity that the world could never give you. No promotion could fill it. No relationship could sustain it. Because what was being reserved for you isn't human-sized. Second, the protocol you're going to receive involves 3 actions that seal the end of this chapter and armor you against ever being governed by lack again. not as a mental exercise, but as a spiritual act with real weight. Third, when this video is over, you're going to be able to declare something you've maybe never said with total conviction. I don't need anyone's permission to know who I am. Not as an affirmation you repeat until you believe it, but as a documented fact. These 3 things are coming to you before you leave. Now I need you to do something small. Close your eyes for just a second if you can. Take a deep breath. What I'm about to tell you doesn't work if your attention is split. You need to be fully present for what's next, because what I'm about to show you are the signs. And these aren't signs someone else can see for you. These are movements that happen deep inside you that prove this chapter started closing before you even had a name for it. Sign 1. You lost your taste for what used to distract you. That endless scrolling that used to kill time. The group chats that used to feel necessary. The shows or the noise you used to use to fill the gaps. Suddenly they just stopped working. You try to go back to them, but you can't. You try to engage, and you leave feeling emptier than when you started. You called it a phase. You called it burnout. You called it being uninspired. What was actually happening was that your spirit signaled that the fill level has changed. What used to be enough isn't enough anymore. Not because you got picky, but because you were being prepared for more. Sign 2. Compliments that used to be your lifeline stopped sustaining you. The approval of certain people, the stuff that used to be your fuel, felt hollow the moment you received it. You take the compliment, you say thank you, but on the inside, you don't feel the hit you expected. You called this ingratitude. You called it being numb. You thought something was wrong with you. What was actually happening was that your heart started refusing the wrong kind of fuel. A heart designed to be filled by the Father can no longer survive on the sugar high of human approval. That isn't arrogance, it's a calibration of your soul. Sign 3. Moments of stillness arrived in the middle of the chaos without you asking for them. In the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a brutal day, at the exact moment when everything inside you should have been screaming, there was a silence. Not something you earned, not something you produced. It was installed. You called it dissociation. You called it being too tired to care. Some people might have called it emotional blunting. What it actually was, the silence of God installed beneath the noise. The peace that passes all understanding isn't felt when things are quiet. It's felt in the middle of what should have destroyed you. Sign 4. You started looking at your past through a different lens, without even trying. An old memory came back, a situation from years ago, and this time, you saw something you didn't see before. You saw a direction where you used to only see confusion. You saw protection where you used to see neglect. You saw preparation where you used to see a delay. You called this forcing yourself to be at peace. You called it trying to convince yourself. What it actually was, the Spirit rewriting your narrative from the inside out. Because no new chapter can start while the previous one is still being read through the wrong eyes. This next sign is the hardest one to hear. It's the one the enemy has spent the most time trying to get you to ignore, to call it a delusion, to call it emotional self-sabotage. Sign 5. You woke up with a certainty that didn't come from anything visible. One morning, or right as you opened your eyes, there was a sense that something had shifted. Nothing on the outside had changed. The bank account was the same. The phone call hadn't come. The situation wasn't resolved, but there was a certainty. Light, almost silent, as if something had been notarized while you were sleeping. The enemy called that a delusion. He called it wishful thinking because you want it so bad. He called it spiritual naivety. What it actually was, the Father communicating directly to you that the spiritual transaction was complete before a single piece of evidence hit the physical world. Because faith isn't a reaction to evidence. It is the substance of things not yet seen. If any of these signs resonated with you, type "free" in the comments right now. This is your public record that you recognize the move. Let me stop for 1 full minute before I continue. You need a story right now. Not for entertainment, but for recognition. Because what's happening to you has happened before, and it was written down so that when your turn came, you wouldn't be blindsided. Joseph was 17 when he got the dream. Before any success, before any power, heaven showed him a picture of his destiny. And then came the years in the pit, the years in prison, the years where the people who should have helped him forgot his name and moved on. And in all those years, the void. Not the void of someone who was abandoned, but the void of someone who was being emptied. Because you can't fit what's meant for a cathedral into a closet. Joseph didn't go to prison because he failed. He went to prison because the process of emptying requires confinement. You don't empty a vessel while it's in motion. You stop it, you open it, and you remove everything that doesn't belong in the next filling. What Joseph called abandonment was actually formation. What he called divine silence was the Father guarding the space for a level of authority that no human approval could ever hold. Now think about the moth. There's a human instinct to help when we see something struggling to get free. A moth inside a cocoon looks like it's suffering. The movement is slow, it's hard, and someone with good intentions might cut the cocoon open early. What happens? The moth comes out, but its wings stay shriveled. They never fully expand. Because the resistance of that cocoon wasn't an obstacle. It was the mechanism of formation. The struggle of getting out is what pumps the fluid into the wings. Whoever removes the struggle steals the ability to fly. The void you tried to eliminate, the feeling of not enough that you tried to fill with anything that came your way, that was your cocoon. And God didn't open it early, because opening it early would have robbed you of the capacity to carry what's coming next. Joseph and the moth end up in the same place. What looked like confinement was the only environment where your true identity could be forged. To leave early would have been to lose the destiny. Type Joseph or moth in the comments, whichever one makes more sense to you today. Let me pause for a second. You got here carrying something that no one else fully saw. You tried to fill it with achievements, with relationships, with approval, with being busy, with constant motion so you wouldn't have to sit still with it. None of it lasted, not because you chose wrong, but because the space in your soul was shaped in a way that none of those things could fit. The signs I named show that something has already started moving without you lifting a finger. The taste that went away, the approval that felt empty, the silence that came uninvited, the new view of your past, the morning certainty that didn't need proof. These aren't symptoms of a problem. They are symptoms of a transition. The chapter didn't close because you finally got over it. It closed because the space was finally ready to receive what the world could never provide. And now, the Father has something to say to you before revealing who you really are in the middle of all this. I saw every night you spent running that audit in the dark. I saw every time your hands shook and you still told them you were fine. What you called loneliness in those moments, I call testimony, because I was present for every single one, and what belongs to you has already been sealed by heaven. What I'm revealing to you now isn't a human title. It's what I call you when I speak to the angels about you. You are the bearer of the chosen mark. Every time you tried to fill the void with what the world offered and you refused to be satisfied, I recorded that. Every time the distraction didn't work, every time the approval felt hollow, every time you walked away from a place that should have been enough, feeling like it wasn't, I didn't see that as instability. I saw it as faithfulness to the calling. You were rejecting the counterfeit without even knowing you were doing it. And that act of rejection, repeated over years, is the mark of the chosen. What this identity authorizes you to do is stop apologizing for not fitting into small spaces. Stop pretending the ordinary is enough. Stop interpreting your discomfort with just okay as ingratitude. That discomfort was a sign of your caliber, not a character flaw. You are the guardian of the sacred space. The void you carried wasn't filled with just anything, and that act of not filling it, even when you didn't understand what you were doing, even when you were suffering, even when you desperately wanted something to just close the hole, I saw that refusal as obedience. You guarded a sacred space without knowing it was sacred. You didn't let the inferior occupy what was reserved for the superior, and that wasn't easy. It cost you sleep. It cost you years of comparison. It cost you silences that hurt. What this identity authorizes you to do is rename your past emptiness as faithfulness. You can start receiving what's coming now without guilt. You can stop carrying shame for something that was actually spiritual guardianship. You are the open gate. The closing of this chapter isn't the end of a fight. It's the beginning of a function. I formed you in the void so that you could be a turning point for others who are still in the middle of it. Not as someone who just got through it, but as someone who was specifically forged in that environment to have the authority to speak to those still inside. Your story isn't a past to be forgotten. It is a credential. It is the language that opens what was locked for everyone else. What this identity authorizes you to do is stop hiding your history and start using it as your badge of office. Stop treating the process as a shame to be overcome. It is the exact part of you that carries the most weight in what's coming next. Write down the name of the identity you just received in the comments. Not the one that sounds the best, the one that hit you. The one that made something move inside you when it was named. And if you aren't subscribed to this channel yet, do it now, because what's coming in the next few weeks was built for the people who made it this far. There are 3 actions that seal what was revealed here. I call it the protocol of the sealed chapter. Step 1. Name out loud what this chapter tried to teach you. Not what was done against you. Not what you lost. What the process formed in you. The resilience you developed. The clarity that came from what didn't work out. The ability to discern that only exists because you lived through what didn't belong to you. Say it out loud. Not for someone else to hear, but for heaven to record what you confess in the open. Step 2. Physically surrender the last tie to the version of you that needed approval to feel whole. Open your hands, palms up. This isn't just a symbolic gesture. It is a real act of surrender with a real target. The version of you that checked what everyone else thought to calibrate your own value. The version that needed an external answer to know if you were on the right track. That version served a purpose. It got you here. Now, you release it with gratitude, but without nostalgia. Step 3. Declare an identity. Not as a wish, but as a documented fact in heaven. Out loud, I am chosen, and this chapter is closed. Or use the specific name of the identity you received. Say it with the weight of someone declaring what is already finished, not someone asking for it to be finished. The sign of confirmation isn't euphoria. It isn't crying. It isn't an intense feeling. It's a quietness. A weight that leaves without making a sound. A sense that the audit is over. That there's nothing left to tally up. When that hits you, you'll know the protocol was received. If you're doing this right now, type "received" in the comments. The public record has spiritual weight. In the next 72 hours, 3 things are going to be thrown at you. Not as a possibility, as a certainty. The first is selective memory. It shows up disguised as being realistic. Right after the breakthrough, the enemy brings back your worst failures. Not the neutral memories, the heaviest ones. The ones where you look small, behind, or inadequate. He presents these as evidence that the identity you received here is a lie, that it was nice while the video lasted, but the reality is your track record. The weapon is the comparison between what was declared and what was lived. The antidote is knowing that the record was the cocoon. And the moth that flies isn't defined by the silk it left behind. The second is the urgency test. It shows up as an opportunity. A situation or a person will demand that you fill that old space in the same old way. The way the void used to demand. It'll look reasonable, even smart, but deep down it's asking you to go back to using someone else's yardstick to measure your worth. This test arrives right after the protocol to see if the shift was real. The weapon is urgency. Now, before it's too late, or you'll lose out. The antidote is the same stillness from the protocol. An identity that is notarized doesn't need to be proved under pressure. The third is chronological comparison. It comes dressed in humility. Other people got there faster, with less pain, with less effort, without all that time in the void. And the question that follows, maybe my chapter was smaller than theirs? Maybe what was revealed here matters less because it took so long? The weapon is the speed limit ruler. The antidote, Joseph stayed in prison longer than most people even appear in the story. What determines the weight of your destiny isn't the speed of the process. It's the specificity of the formation. And then there's the internal enemy. The most dangerous voice doesn't come from the outside. It speaks with your own accent. And it's going to tell you that the quiet you felt during the protocol was just self-suggestion. That you wanted to believe it so badly you made yourself feel it. That tomorrow, the void will be right back where it was. That voice disguises itself as maturity or sobriety. It claims to be protecting you from being deluded. But what it really wants is for you to dissolve the decree before it manifests. Type "protected" in the comments right now. The decree was sealed. And what heaven seals, an internal voice cannot undo. Right hand on your chest. Feet firm on the ground. Eyes closed if you can. Take one deep breath. Now, I need you to let go of a few things. Out loud if you can. In silence if that's all you have left. Hand over the version of you that needed validation to know you were enough. That version wasn't wrong for needing it. It was raised in an environment that taught it the ruler was on the outside. But that environment has ended. Hand that version over with respect for what it carried, and with the certainty that you are no longer governed by it. Hand over the nights of auditing where the yardstick wasn't yours. Every time you lay down and added up what was missing using a scale that didn't belong to you. Those nights had real weight, and now you're handing them over. Not because they didn't hurt, but because they finished their job. Hand over the void you tried to carry in secret, the performance of being whole while the feeling of lack screamed underneath. That weight was real, and now it no longer has an address in your body. Now I speak. I saw the night you typed "I'm okay" while your hand was shaking. I saw the effort that response cost you. I saw that the person on the other side had no idea. But I knew. And that moment didn't go unnoticed. It was recorded. I saw every time you smiled in public while the feeling of lack was sitting right there next to you. I saw the effort of appearing whole for a world that wouldn't have been able to hold what you were carrying. I didn't blame you for the smile. I honored you for still being on your feet. I was in every midnight audit. Every time you added up what was missing in the dark. Not because I left you there, but because those moments were exactly where I was closest. The silence you felt in those nights wasn't my absence. It was the silence of someone standing next to a person going through something that needs to be walked through, not avoided. The void you carried all this time wasn't a sign that I forgot you. It was the space being guarded. I do not allow the inferior to fill what was reserved for the superior. And every time the counterfeit arrived and it didn't last, that was me rejecting what didn't fit the shape of what I've prepared for you. This chapter is closed. Not because the pain just went away on its own. Not because you finally found the right thing to fill it. It's closed because you stopped needing the world to provide what only I can give. That is the real ending. Not the end of suffering, but the end of the lack governing who you are. You are chosen. You are the guardian of the sacred space. You are an open gate for what's coming and for those who are still in the thick of it. What belongs to you is already sealed by heaven, and what is sealed by heaven cannot be revoked. Now say it out loud. This chapter is closed. I am chosen, and I never need that void again. Say it for real. Say it with the weight of someone declaring a finished work. Type "done" in the comments right now. Not as a video over comment, but as a public decree. Heaven records what you confess in the open. If you know someone who is still in the middle of this chapter, someone still doing the midnight audits, someone still smiling in public while they carry that hole in their chest, send this video to them right now. Not as a suggestion, but as an act of care. And if they want to go deeper, the link is in the first comment, waiting for them just like it waited for you. The next video starts right where this one leaves off. Don't miss it. It is done. You are not the same person you were when this message started. You seek. You dedicate yourself. You do everything right, and yet abundance never comes. And the worst part? You start wondering if you're doing something wrong, if you're being heard up above, if it's meant for you at all. It's not a lack of faith or worthiness. It's a spiritual blockage that ordinary prayer alone cannot break. The Miracle Journal unblocks this in 21 days with a spiritual protocol that works exactly where your prayer doesn't reach. Along with the journal, you'll also receive as a gift the prayer guide and the Psalms manual with the most powerful sacred practices and texts to deepen your transformation. To claim your version of the journal, tap the link in the comments right below this video.